Thank you for joining us. I'm Brett Rutherford. I'm the minister at the Mersey Bluff Church of Christ in Devonport, Tasmania, Australia. We meet every Sunday at 232 William Street. We meet for worship in the morning at 9:30. That's followed by a period of Bible study, and then on Sunday night we meet again at 6 p.m. In the midweek we have a devotional on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. and you're welcome to come to all of these services. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to study the Bible with you. And we have a number of options. We have Bible correspondence courses. We have open Bible studies where we sit down at the table and consider what God's ambition is for your life. We'd love to be able to sit down and study the Bible with you. So you can contact us whether you would like more information, whether you have a Bible question, or whether you want a Bible study. We'd love to hear any questions that you might have or any inquiries that you might make. And you can contact us through our website, which is www.merseybluffcofc.com.au. That's merseybluffcofc.com.au. Now, today we're going to look at some questions that are posed by atheists. And these are questions that are commonly asked. A few weeks ago I received a letter from a lady who claimed to be an atheist. We had sent her an introductory Bible correspondence course, and she responded to that by giving us or sending us a list of questions. And she was hoping, of course, for us to critically think about these questions and come to the conclusion that there is no God. Well, I did consider all of these questions that this atheist sent, and I went through and I answered all of these questions. Now, unfortunately, this atheist did not send a return address, and so I could not respond to her questions. She apparently only wanted to criticize Christianity and deny that there was a God without anybody trying to persuade her otherwise with logic or reason. And so because I could not send her a return letter answering her questions, I'm going to answer them in this video. In fact, this is going to be a series of videos, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 videos, however long it takes us to answer each of these questions that this atheist has posed. And these are questions that are commonly posed by those who do not believe in God, who get very defensive when you try to or offer them any kind of Bible study whatsoever. These will be questions that they will ask in defense of their religion, which is atheism. And don't be wrong, don't be fooled. The fact is that atheism is a religion. It's a religion that is based upon faith. They may tell you that it's based upon science, but really it contradicts science. And you have to have a lot of faith, really, to believe in atheism. And we're going to highlight some of these scientific laws in this lesson and subsequent lessons relating to this series that show that atheism actually contradicts science. It actually contradicts known scientific law. And an honest atheist will tell you, atheism and the theory of evolution is just that. It's a theory. It's not proven. And it's really a very poor theory because it contradicts so many scientific principles that are well established in the fields of biology and physics and chemistry and so forth. Nearly every field of science you can see that evolution contradicts that. And so it also contradicts just plain reason and logic, and we'll highlight that in this series of lessons as well. But I think it's important for us to take the time to consider these questions because these are questions that people commonly have about God's existence and about the Bible. And it may be that you're not an atheist. It may be that maybe you classify yourself as an agnostic. That is, you're not quite sure. And so I hope that this series of lessons will, of course, bring you to some conclusion about the existence of God. And hopefully I will be able to persuade you that God does exist. And that, of course, you need to study His book, that is the Bible, more closely to see what His ambition is for you. But the first question that this atheist posed in her letter was, how do you rate your chances of success in recruiting people via this method? Now, she's referring to the Bible correspondence course that we sent to her address. And we sent it not only to her address, but all of the people that were living in her community. So we didn't isolate this particular person because they were an atheist. We sent it to everybody in the community to give everybody in the community the opportunity to study God's Word and to enrich their life by His directions and instruction. And so that's what she's referring to when she talks about how do you rate your chances of success in via this method. She does a follow-up question, or she asks a follow-up question. Do you realize that you only create resentment? Well, I think we created resentment in this atheist, but I'm not sure that's generally true among those in the community. So there would be those in the community who would no doubt believe in God and appreciate the fact that there is a group that is making an effort to teach people the Bible. And so I think she's probably overstepped her bounds there in making that assumption. But the fact is that she also used an obscene illustration to make her point, and I can't mention what that illustration was. No doubt that was done in a way or presented because she actually intended to offend us, and she knew it would be offensive, and so I'm not going to mention that at all. But my first response to this question, and the beginning of this response and the foundation of the reason why we evangelize, why we send out these Bible correspondence courses, why we offer people the opportunity in the community to study the Bible with us. Why do we do that? Why do we want to door knock and encourage people to come along to our services and our special gospel meetings and things like that? Why do we do that? Why do we evangelize? Well, the basis of that really is the fact that men have an eternal soul. We can go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 21, and there we read Solomon, the inspired prophet of God and king of Israel. He said, "Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goeth upward, and the spirit of the animal, which goes down to the earth?" What did Solomon mean by that when he wrote those words by inspiration in the book of Ecclesiastes? Well, he simply says that there is an eternal element to mankind. In other words, mankind has a soul. Sometimes that word is translated spirit or mind, however you want to translate it, but that's what we have. We have something that's in addition to our physical makeup. Our physical makeup is housing something that really is not tangible. You know, we can't measure it, we can't weigh it, we can't evaluate it. But it is the thing that I think gives life. It is the soul. And he points out here that our soul goes on. It goes on beyond this world. When our physical existence is ended, when our physical body dies, our spirit leaves that body and it lives on. That's what he meant by the phrase, it goes upward. In other words, up to a spiritual realm. And then, of course, he also says, by contrasting men with animals, he says that animals, their spirit goes downward when they die. In other words, their existence ceases at the point of death. And so they don't have a spirit that lives on like man. That's the difference between men and animals. Men have a spirit that lives on after their death, and animals do not. And so that is what he's highlighting here. You know, even evolutionists battle with this idea of something that exists beyond just the physical body. Beyond the biological makeup of human beings, they recognize that there is something else involved and at work. Paul Davies, who is an evolutionary professor, I'm not exactly sure what, maybe you would call him an evolutionary theorist. He used to teach at the University of Adelaide in South Australia. I'm not sure where he is now, but he's written many books on the subject of evolution, of course promoting its doctrines, well respected among evolutionists. He wrote a book called The Origin of Life. And in that book, he really battles with this concept of the consciousness of mankind, the seat of emotion, love and things of that nature, creativity. Where does that all come from? Is that just a combination of chemical reactions and biological responses? You know, he really struggles. Where does that come from? He calls it really the spark of life. What is the spark of life? How do we have life? You know, you can take all of the elements of a human being and you can put them, arrange them in the proper order. You can put the brain where it belongs. You can put the heart where it belongs. You can put the lungs and all the internal organs where they belong. You can put everything perfectly in order if you're able to do that. Of course, I don't think that's scientifically possible. That's kind of a Frankenstein kind of idea. But if you did that, if you put all of the human elements together and perfectly ordered where everything belongs, you still don't have life, do you? You need something else. Well, what is it that goes beyond those biological elements? We don't know. Science can't measure that. But there's something else that's sort of intangible that gives that human body life. As Paul Davies, the evolutionist, calls it, the spark of life. What gives it the spark? What brings it to life? Well, I believe that's the soul. The Bible has an explanation. The Bible can tell you what brings that body to life. It's the soul. It is the part of the human being that thinks, that loves. You know, it's not very romantic for an evolutionist to go home and say to his wife, "I love you." Because really, what does that mean to him? Well, to evolutionists, they might suggest, well, love is just a bunch of chemical reactions and it's kind of just a random kind of thing. So, that doesn't sound very romantic, does it? I have a chemical attraction to you. You know, there's more to love than that. And of course, I think even evolutionists know that. Paul Davies knows that. And he can't find or put his finger upon what that is. But the Bible explains that. And so man has a soul. It is the seat of his being, really. It is his inner man. It is his consciousness. And so it's the seat of his reason and love and things like that. Things that just cannot really be measured by chemical reactions. And so that makes him very different from man. We read in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 28, that right from the beginning, God made man very special. He separated man from the animal kingdom. Now, evolutionists say that man is just an animal. And that's part of the problem. That has taken a terrible toll on society because people are treated like animals. Well, people aren't animals. People are something different. People are separate from the animal kingdom. They were made specially by God. We read in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28, then God said, "Let us make man in our image." Now, of course, we see the plural pronoun there, the plural first person pronoun, which, of course, refers to all the persons of the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so we have them here, of course, being referred to. He says, let them have dominion. This is the human beings that they want to create, over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man. And He didn't create man to be equal with the animal kingdom. He made man to have dominion over the animal kingdom, to have control over the animal kingdom. That is God's design. He goes on to highlight that particular point by showing how special mankind really is. He says, so God created man in His own image. He didn't create the animals in His own image, and there's a lot that's entailed in that statement, His own image. Of course, it mainly is a reference to the spiritual side of man that lives on beyond his physical existence. He goes to a spiritual realm after he leaves this earth. Much like God is, of course, an eternal spiritual being. Our spirit will live on after our physical body dies. And so God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him. Male and female, He created them. And so, male and female, there's no distinction made in their importance to God. God equally thinks that men are as important as women and women are as important as men. All of them have a soul, an eternal soul, which is precious to God. All men and women are precious to God. God holds them up as being equals in nature, that is, in their spiritual nature, their makeup. Then it says, then he blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the seas, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so we see that mankind is is a being that is special. And it is a being that is distinct from the animal kingdom that God created. Human beings, as we noted in Ecclesiastes, have a soul that lives on beyond this earthly realm. And so atheists, unfortunately, do not distinguish between human life and animal life. And so, if human beings act like animals and behave like animals, and that's what atheists, of course, wouldn't be surprised by if human beings acted like animals, because after all, they are animals according to atheists, according to evolutionists. But we don't want people to act like animals, do we? When a male lion comes into a new pride, he's going to fight the dominant male that is in charge of that pride, in charge of that lion family. And if he wins, this invading lion, if he is able to defeat the other male lion, then he will destroy the young of that male lion. He will go in and devastate the family, and then, of course, he will take over the female lions and, of course, have cubs by them, his own cubs. He's going to destroy the other cubs of the old lion who used to be in charge. Do we want that to happen? Do we want that kind of thing to be the case in society? That's animalistic behavior. We know that that's a part of the natural world. But human beings are different, aren't they? We don't want to be considered to be animals. We want to be considered something special, and we are. And so we don't need to do that. That's one of the dangers of evolutionary theory. Treating men just like animals, not emphasizing the fact that men have an eternal soul. That's very dangerous, because men just think to themselves, well, my life is not going as I planned. It's miserable. I have lots of problems. Maybe I've got a fatal illness that I'm suffering with. All kinds of problems in my life. I might just end it. Because after all, I'm just like an animal. I'll just cease to exist. And wouldn't that be better than the existence I've got now? That's the way some people think. And so suicide rates have gone up since evolutionary theory has been something that's been bombarded upon society. And so it's correlated to the rise in suicides. We need to teach people that there's something special about them. That they're not just animals. They shouldn't behave like animals. And that there's something that's special to God. And so we're convinced that the soul will spend, eternity in one of two places. Either heaven, which is a place of eternal joy that God has prepared for those who are willing to follow His instructions, or a place of eternal separation. And so we don't want to be eternally separated from God. We want to be in that place of joy and happiness that is heaven. And so, because we love the souls of all men and women, getting back to our original question that our atheists posed, why we're doing this, why we are evangelizing, why we're sending out Bible correspondence courses, why we are knocking doors and trying to encourage people to get into Bible study, it's because we love the souls of men and women in our community. And we are obligated by whatever means necessary in order to help them reach heaven. Now, when I say by every means necessary, I don't mean by force. But we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they have the opportunity to hear the gospel. And then if they accept it or if they reject it, that's up to them. God leaves that up to the individuals to make that choice. Jesus instructed us to reach out to those souls. In Matthew chapter 28 and verse 19, he says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost." In Acts chapter 8 and verses 1 through 4, at least the first few verses of Acts chapter 8, we can see the disciples carrying out what we sometimes call that Great Commission of reaching lost souls, of helping souls get to heaven, to that wonderful paradise with God. And so we can see that when they were scattered abroad by persecution, wherever they went and settled, they preached the gospel. They taught men what was necessary in order to help them get to heaven. And so we can see that in Acts chapter 8. And we can see that it's the personal responsibility there of every Christian to do that. So that's why we send out these Bible correspondence courses. That's why we knock on doors and we try to get into studies with people. That's why we invite people to our worship services to find out more about God's church. You know, obviously it is true that not everyone will respond positively when we come and knock on their door or when we send them something in the mail. Obviously this atheist took a great deal of offense by receiving something in the mail. I'm not sure why you would be offended by just simply a letter that comes in the mail, but anyway, that she was greatly offended, obviously, by this piece of mail that came through the post. And so, you know, we know that there are going to be people who reject it. We know that there are going to be people who resent our efforts. You know, we're warned about that by Jesus. You know, he warned his disciples, those who follow him and those who evangelize and so forth, that the world is going to oppose him, and there's going to be some in the world that hate them for it. There's going to be others, of course, who will love them for it, who will appreciate their efforts. But there's going to be many that will not. There's going to be some who will show resentment. In Luke chapter 6 and verse 22, Jesus said, "Blessed are you when men hate you, and when they exclude you and revile you and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake." So there's going to be those who hate us. There's going to be some who exclude us because of the message that we bring. In John chapter 15, verses 18 and 19, again, we find the words of Jesus. And these are just two occasions. There were many times in his teaching where he warned about the cost of discipleship. That the world is going to despise us, hate us, even persecute us. And I think we're seeing more and more of that in the world today in the 21st century, where Christianity has become the target of much hatred. He said there in John chapter 15, verses 18 and 19, "If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of this world, the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of this world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you." So the world is going to hate us for following Jesus. We know that. We know there's going to be some resentment in the community. But I don't think it's to the extent at the moment that this atheist suggests that it is, that everybody in the community is going to resent us for trying to reach out to them with this wonderful gift of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, you know, that will not stop us. The resentment that sometimes we have in the community towards our efforts, that's not going to stop us from our kind and loving appeal to men and women to spend eternity with God in heaven. The second group of questions posed by this atheist was, do we feel the need to get attention with this unsolicited correspondence? You know, what's in it for you? Do you score God points or something? Was her questions that she asked, related, of course, to each other, this group of questions. First, we promote the gospel out of a love for God. You know, there's every reason to love God. We look around us in nature and we look at the things that God has created. We look at the wonderful fruits and vegetables that help sustain life. We look at the beauties of the country around us, and we can see the beautiful mountains and the sunsets and all of these wonderful things that God has created for our enjoyment. And He's created us and given us food. We've got the animals. We've got dominion over the animals. And so that doesn't mean that we abuse animals. But, of course, we have the right to use animals as food as well. And so God has created all of these means for us to sustain life. And so that alone tells us that the God that created all of this is a loving God. Is a gracious God who is concerned about our well-being. And so He's done that for us. God, of course, also created this wonderful place of eternal rest and told us how to get there. We've already talked a little bit about heaven in this lesson so far. God has done that, and He's provided the means by which we can give and get to heaven. And so He's provided His Son as the means to do that. And so we love God. And because of everything that God has done for us, the way that He has enriched our lives. And Jesus presented this truth, and really it's a self-evident truth in John chapter 14 and verse 15. When we think about all the things that God has done for us, it's a very natural thing to love God, isn't it? In John chapter 14 and verse 15, there Jesus said, "If you love me," what? "Keep my commandments." There's a lot of people who think they can love Jesus or claim to love Jesus, but they don't keep His commandments. Well, that's not really true love. Because we love Jesus, we want to do what He says or tells us to do, because we know that what Jesus tells us to do is in our own best interest. That's why God instructed people to obey their parents, because their parents love them. And even though children don't know when they're young what's in their best interest, their parents do. And so their parents give them instruction to help them avoid some of the common pitfalls that perhaps their parents even experienced when they were younger. And they don't want their children to suffer those things because they love their children. And so they give them caring instruction to steer them away from harm. Well, God does the same thing for us. And so because we love God and He loves us, we're going to follow His instruction. Second, we evangelize because we love souls, and we've touched upon that. We want you to go to heaven. In Revelation chapter 21, we've talked about heaven, but we haven't really described what a wonderful place of bliss it is. Let's go over to Revelation chapter 21 and look at verses 1 through 4. It says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, who was receiving this vision of heaven, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He dwell with them, and they shall be His people. God Himself shall be with them and be their God, and God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there will be no death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." And so here we see this glorious image of heaven and the kinds of things that we're going to enjoy in heaven. We're no longer going to enjoy any kind of suffering and crying and all of these. And so we have essentially the church in glory here. The tabernacle of God, that is the people of God now in glory. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 it says that when Jesus comes again, at His second coming, He's going to take the church up into heaven. The church is, of course, the body of the saved, the body of the people who love Jesus enough to follow His instructions. And so they will be with Him throughout eternity, and they will, of course, no longer experience crying or weeping or mourning. They will no longer experience death. They will no longer experience any kind of sorrow. For those things are passed away when Jesus comes again. They're part of this world. That's a wonderful thing. We want everybody to enjoy that. And that's what motivates us to evangelize. And so this really answers the first question and the second group of questions, why we do these evangelistic efforts. And so, we want people not only to enjoy a life of contentment and happiness in this world, and we believe that true happiness and contentment comes by following Jesus' instructions for our life. Jesus said in John chapter 10 and verse 10, "I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it" what? More abundantly. Jesus came to give us an abundant life. His teachings, His instructions are there so that we can have a full life, so that we can have an abundant life. There's a lot of people who might say, well, I tried Christianity and, it didn't give me any happiness. I didn't have any contentment. It wasn't really an abundant life for me at all. Well, I put it to you that those people actually never did commit themselves fully to Christ. And that's why they resent it now. If you gave yourself over fully to Christ's instructions and guidance for your life, I guarantee you, you will find contentment. You will find happiness. You will avoid many of the pitfalls that make so many people unhappy. And so those who have done that know that his statement there in John chapter 10 is true. As Paul said in the book of Philippians, we will have a peace that passes all understanding. Despite the problems and difficulties of this world, I still have peace of mind. Despite maybe my personal problems, my personal illness, whatever it may be, I still find peace of mind because I've given myself over to Jesus and I know what waits for me beyond this life of suffering. I'm preparing for that, and we want other people to prepare for that as well. The third group of questions that this atheist asked relates to the supposed intrusion of sending this offer of a Bible correspondence course through the mail to her address. Of course, as I pointed out, we didn't only send it to her, but I must say again, I find this quite a remarkable accusation. That this is somehow an intrusion because you send something in the mail to somebody. Now, it's a very simple thing that if you want to reject this glorious gift that God offers, all you have to do is when you receive that offer of a Bible correspondence course, I hope you don't do this, but all you have to do is just crumple up that piece of paper and throw it in the bin. It's as easy as that. We're not putting you out by sending you a Bible correspondence course. We're hoping to give you a gift that comes from God, the gift of eternal life, of having eternal joy with God. It's not an intrusion. It's a gift. If we behave like the Teutonic Knights behaved back in the Middle Ages, that would be an intrusion. And what the Teutonic Knights would do is they would go into a village and they would take all of the residents of the village down to the local body of water, whether it's a river or a lake or whatever, and they would baptize them, and then they would kill them. And they would reason in their minds, oh, well, we've saved them spiritually, that's the most important thing. And so, it's all right if we kill them right afterwards. That's a terrible philosophy, and that is contrary to the Bible, obviously. That is not the way we are to spread the Word of God. There's a lot of false ideas that are separate from the Bible that have arisen in various religious groups that claim to be Christians. But those kind of ideas, like the philosophy of the Teutonic Knights, is not what the Bible teaches. And so we do this out of kindness and love, trying to persuade men, of course, to take up God's offer of eternal salvation. It's not meant as an intrusion. If somebody comes to your door and knocks on your door from the Mersey Bluff Church of Christ and offers you a Bible study or invites you to come along to a gospel meeting, whatever it may be. If you don't want to accept that, all you have to do is say no and close the door. We're not going to stick our foot in the door. We're not going to barge in. We're not going to send the boys around if you reject it. We're just going to simply walk away. But just remember that you're turning down the greatest gift that's been offered to mankind. And so that's why we do it. We don't mean it as an intrusion. I wonder if she thought about this question, this point, when she wrote this extensive letter to me. I wonder if she thought about, whether or not it was an intrusion in my life when she included these questions and when she attacked my faith and when she, of course, even included some obscene examples. Did she think that that might be an intrusion? Well, it's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? I don't mind her letter. I'm not suggesting that. I'm glad she wrote that letter. I'm not glad that she put in those obscene bits, but I'm glad that she wrote the letter and posed these questions because it helped me develop these lessons. And I hope that she hears the response to these. The fourth question, I think this will be the final question we deal with in this section, is a personal question as to whether I have read the Bible or not. So, in fact, I have read the Bible many times over, and so we'll deal with that a little bit more perhaps in our next lesson about the importance of the study of God's Word. But thanks for joining me for this session. We're going to continue on in the next lesson and perhaps the lesson following that, dealing with these questions posed by an atheist. Thank you.